study,
and play come together on a Windows 11 PC.
And for a limited time, college students get
The best of both worlds.
Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
In my family, people who are, raising kids, like we consume video content, just as much as we can kind of consume the actual words. And so I think understanding where audiences are as a whole right now and how they want to get information, how they want to engage with that information, it's really important. And this is a terrific platform to be able to sort of do it in.
This is Small Press Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. All right, today on the podcast, I'm joined by my friend David Arkin, founder of David Arkin Consulting, where he does audience growth, branded content, AI, SEO, and newsletters for local media companies. And David I was just saying before we were officially going that you were an early guest on the show, man. You were episode number 11 about 2 years ago. So I think this is episode 120 something now. So thanks for joining me again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Yeah, and anybody who wants kind of a background on David's kind of overall stuff he does, go back to episode 11 in the feed. You can listen there. But today, I wanted to have you on because we kind of had some similar interests recently. I've seen you posting a lot on LinkedIn and stuff about vertical video and kind of the opportunity there for local media companies. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. How did this become kind of a focus for you and just a core thing you've been working on lately? And how did that come up in your world?
Yeah, well, probably in like a lot of different ways. Some of this was clients on the TV side that we've been really, focused on around how to get them to storytell, how to sort of use the platform. But I would also say that there have been so many changes. A lot of people, when they think of vertical video, they think of, social media platforms. There have obviously been a lot of changes on social media platforms with how where engagements, kind of coming from and links and posts have really been hard to come by in terms of traffic. Like the platforms just, Facebook specifically has really sort of downgraded that. You got to do all sorts of different things. You got to write out the post now. You got to get the link into the first comment. Like you got to do all these sort of like things. It's just hard to, kind of get traffic. But I don't think it means that those platforms aren't really important. It doesn't mean that those platforms aren't where like a lot of the audience is. And probably know today that a lot of them go to those platforms, whatever you think about this, for news, that's where they're consuming that information. And so we really need to be there. And one of the best ways to be there today in terms of being seen is through Reels. And so it doesn't mean that I don't think we should be doing graphics and detailed posts and all those things in terms of, trying to get links to stories. I think that's like definitely like part of it. But definitely video is a way that people want to consume that information. And I think there's like this idea out there that, that's just like a young person's thing. I don't think that's the case at all. I think there is, it's definitely not just a 20 and 30-year-old thing that people want to consume. And for me, I'll tell you in my family, people who are, raising kids, like we consume video content, just as much as we can kind of consume the actual words. And so I think understanding where audiences are as a whole right now and how they want to get information, how they want to engage with that information, is really important. And this is a terrific platform to be able to sort of do it in. Maybe we'll get into this during a podcast today, but there definitely were some revenue things that we were hearing before. And honestly, before I started doing consulting, I was co-running a real estate community site called Checkout DFW in Dallas. It was basically helping people figure out before they move to Dallas or if they're moving city to city in Dallas. How do you find a realtor, pick a community, and do all those things? And we interviewed like a ton of realtors before we decided to do this website. And what we heard over and over again is, I need content, and like from the realtors. And what they really were, and this might be surprising to people, but what they were uncomfortable with was putting a camera in front of their face and talking. Like they wanted like help to figure out what to say. They wanted to be they wanted somebody to record them. They were looking for that sort of guidance. And what that told me was advertisers really wanted to figure out how to, use this platform just as much as like editorial teams needed to figure out how to like explain news and do all the different forms of storytelling that they could do. So all of these things sort of led me to be like, we really need to, this has to be a core component on how we think about content and how we think about getting information, out to people today.
Yeah. Agreed. I can't stand the actual platform, the Facebook, the Instagram, just how difficult and how low they prioritize and everything. But like you said, it's where people are. And that's kind of the point of a media company in some ways, is to find people find your audience where they're at, you know what I mean? So it's I think something maybe people that have been around for a long time don't realize it's like an entire new format. It's kind of, I didn't used to look at reels too much. It kind of slowly crept its way into my personal life. And I'm like, oh, this is not watching TV. It's not scrolling social media. It's like a different thing.
Yeah.
Curious how you're seeing, you said a lot of local TV stations and stuff. I'm curious, like what's landing in terms of like actual content. Cause you said like, how do I actually do the content? Do I just talk to the thing? Like, how are you experimenting with it? And like, what do you see in like work? Like literally, what does a vertical video look like that, you're having folks put up?
Yeah. I think it's best to start off to say what does not work.
Okay, that's better. I like that better.
Yeah. Well, what does not work is taking TV segments and trying to run them as reels. Like that does not work. The time period, nobody's sitting there for 2.5 minutes to watch like your TV broadcast. That's just not the way to do this. And I also would say, and this is the hard thing in TV, it's not as hard in like newspapers and digital only stuff because they aren't on at 4, 5, 6, and 10 in a highly produced, for the most part, highly produced environment. And so being able to get people comfortable that like it's okay to have this be a little bit raw and running live and that kind of thing, it's a hard cultural thing to sort of like get over.
Right.
But once you get over it, I think you can have like a ton of success. So I think those are like two really important components on the local TV side to sort of, move through. So the things that I do think are working well is being able to sort of like show things. And so when a TV reporter is there and not like shooting their package, but they're able to sort of like walk around, because that's what the audience wants. They want like insight, they want to understand the information, but they want to like see what you're seeing. And that's like one of the greatest values that a reel can, kind of like provide, whether it's like I'm at a breaking news situation or I'm walking you through a new restaurant, whatever I'm at an event, whatever I'm experiencing, being able to sort of like show that to the audience is huge, And so I think being able to make sure that's part of the storytelling is really important. I would say the other things that like seem to be really working well right now is that it's utilizing the tools. And when you think about the platforms, the ones that are actually recognizing providing the best performance for the content is when you're using their tools. So when you use Meta's green screen, or when you use sort of like they're following their community guidelines and things that are like going to get you seen in the algorithm, we're seeing a lot of really good performance for those sorts of things. Green screens is like a really key one. And so there are examples of like, meteorologists that are getting out of the studio or getting off from like the big screen, and they're doing green screens now, like not green screen like in TV, but in the Instagram green screen, where they're doing a screenshot and showing you like the weather behind their head and they're pointing above them and talking about it. Those sorts of things are very effective. Or taking the B-roll that somebody got from like a split screen is a really effective like reel approach today, where the reporter talks at the bottom of the screen of the split, and the top of the split is basically like the B-roll or a screenshot of what they're sort of actually talking about. There's this really interesting case with a anchor at a TV station we work with, and I just love this example. I've been working with this client for about 2 years, and I probably had, I don't know, a half dozen conversations with this anchor during those 2 years. And every time it's like, I don't know what I should be, these aren't my stories. I didn't report them, but I'm on air talking about them. I don't know which ones seem appropriate for me to talk about. I don't know how to create time for this stuff. All that I can do is sort of like do stuff like outside of work and posting things for my family. And I feel like that's just like one side. I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so she started experimenting with this idea of taking in TV land, they call it pacers. They're basically like short 30, 45, 30 seconds sort of like quick hit stories. Often, sometimes they're local, sometimes they're sort of like trending and sort of like national, but they make for really great web content, honestly. And so she started taking some of these pacers and started basically putting like a screenshot or some B-roll behind her in a green screen. And she's just like sitting in at her desk, basically like doing these videos. So the first one she did was for Buc-ee's, which people who don't know Buc-ee's,
Mm-hmm.
it's like this big like national gas station. I live in Texas, and it's like the thing in Texas, and now it's in all these states. So there are these crazy gas stations. And so one's coming to Oklahoma. And so she basically like had a few screenshots behind her talking about it. And it wasn't more than 45 seconds. And she introduced herself, and it didn't come across like this was like a TV, like that she was on TV doing it. I wouldn't say it was totally like raw, but it just felt like normal,
Mm-hmm.
and like it worked really well. And then like a few days later, an energy company was leaving Oklahoma to go to some other city, and she talked about that and had some B-roll kind of running behind her. She found stories that were evergreen, or like the energy company sort of was breaking news, but that had several days of life in it. And that's the thing that's, I think, the hard thing with like news companies is like they want to like that story's over in that day, and like they're onto something else. Where like the way the algorithms work is like it's not over that day. Like it has life for like multiple days, like in the algorithm. So if you're picking the stories to explain to the audience what's happening and can, talk about it in a way like if it gets picked up in 2 days, it's not going to be like a weird thing, so you don't want to be like breaking news, the energy company is leaving, you want to sort of like talk a little bit about what it means and why this matters and why you should be paying attention to this and what's next. Like those are the ways to kind of talk about it in the video. But this works so well for her. And so I started taking this to other anchors, and they like loved it too. They were like, okay, I can see how I could establish like a story, a 2 or 3 a week where I could sort of do this format with. And it's really kind of like working there.
That's awesome. That's a great
Yeah.
example. And yeah, you touched on a few things I was curious about. So the green screen, I like the split kind of format you talked about. Very cool, useful stuff there. What also you talked a few times about platforms, algorithms. Might be a good time to ask because vertical video, I think kind of TikTok kind of pioneered it. Reels are huge on Instagram and Facebook. YouTube has shorts. Do you have any thoughts on pros and cons between those platforms? Which works best for, I don't know, reach, for making money? Like, do you focus? Would you tell somebody like a local media company, whatever the case may be, to focus on just Instagram? Or any thoughts there on that?
Yeah, I mean, we tell people to get on TikTok.
Okay.
I mean, and they're on TikTok, they see they do the right things, they will see explosion like very quickly on like the audience side. And so I think the challenge with it is this though. There is like TikTok style videos that work really well. And it's not to say that that same style doesn't work as well like as Instagram, but it can be a little bit different. But the idea that we could go to a newsroom and be like, hey, you need to create 5 different reels for every story and they all have to be different. Like there's just no way that would
Right.
fly.
Right.
And so what we try to do is like blend some of these things. So like one of my favorite TikTok styles, it's so simple, but I'm sure you've sort of seen this, like it's just people sitting in their car talking,
Mhm.
they're telling the story.
Yep.
And so we worked with some TV reporters on the best ways to be able to sort of like do that. Well, can that work on Instagram? Probably. It's really sort of set for TikTok. So if you sort of know where like you think the audience is really going to be and sort of like build formats that are going to be expansive across like all of them, but really kind of like work for the one where you're going to kind of see the most, kind of the most growth for. I think some of it might come down to the publication style too. So if it's like a lifestyle publication or like a city regional, like the TikTok, Instagram thing makes a lot of sense to me. A business publication, I think could be active in TikTok, and there's no reason that business content can't work there. But there's a lot of logic probably that like a YouTube style there could work really well for more business oriented kind of like content. So I think sort of understanding, who you are and what you're trying to achieve, but not to be active in TikTok today, I think is like a major mistake.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Good insight there. I was curious. So I'm going a little out of order here. Obviously, one of the biggest pictures that I've heard from, or biggest questions, I'm sorry, that I've heard from folks, especially in local media, with the state of the industry in some ways, is vertical video actually making publishers money? Or is it still mostly a leap of faith? If it is so, like, how are people doing that? Have you seen that? This is more of like for reach. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways that people can make money with vertical video. One is, and I think people are aware of this, but I'll just tell you the number of people that don't have this set up is crazy. Like you can become eligible to monetize on Meta. And the way that you sort of do this is by building, high engagement. It isn't necessarily that like we see people with 1,000 followers and people with 100,000 followers that become eligible on Meta. So the size of the account, sure, it helps, but it's not the only sort of like factor that's being kind of looked at there. So you will get alerts basically from Meta saying, oh, congratulations, you become eligible to be able to sort of like monetize this page. And so when you do that, like you got to do some back end things within Business Manager to get things set up. It's not the easiest thing, unfortunately, to, kind of like set up, but it's definitely something to look into. And you should see if you at one point were eligible, you can go back to Meta and, request to, appeal to be kind of like eligible, again, but that's definitely something to kind of like watch out for. There are community guidelines that you have to follow with Meta that are really important. Some of this is like kind of like material that they say they don't think should be like on their platform. Some people don't like that, but like if you're gonna, the question I always tell people is if you're gonna play the game in blah blah blah, SEO and whatever, like these are the rules. So like decide if you're gonna do that or not. If you're gonna play, if you want to make money, this is what you have to do. So I think understand those community guidelines, but then understand the best practices to put in place. This is the way that we do this with our clients: is that we work to get their accounts monetizable, and then we work with the teams to make sure that they're doing all the best practices to make sure that the content is being seen. And so one of the ways to do that is to make sure that there are a good volume of reels happening, but not too many because you don't want to do 20 a day. So I think that kind of flow of like making sure that all those like best practices are being sort of like, checkboxed here is going to help kind of with the engagement. It's going to help with the actual revenue that those pages can actually kind of make. So I would say the meta monetization, I wouldn't call it a layup, but it's definitely a way that a publisher can make money. And we're seeing publishers make thousands of dollars a month on it. This isn't like $15. Now, look, you got to have like, our client is not the New York Times. So it's not that size. These are local kind of publishers. And so you can make money on it. The other thing I would sort of say is building packages with reels in mind is a huge opportunity. So when we do branded content, one of our big parts of our business is doing branded content. So we get hired as like a content strategist. Once a media company sells like a campaign, we come in and work with the advertiser to figure out the story or stories. And then we write those stories, get them approved, and then kind of work with the media company to have them fulfill. What we're encouraging most of our clients to do is to have reels be part of those packages. So what we do is we kind of take the highlights of that content and then we build it into a reel. So maybe it's like 3 things to know. Maybe it's like 3 questions that are sort of answered within that reel. We use the assets that we've been able to kind of collect from the advertiser for that story. So like the images or get any B-roll or saying, can we have access to like any YouTube video that you have to sort of use in this? And then they get another like distribution channel that they wouldn't get by just like pushing out the article. And so there are some other ways that you can actually like integrate the advertiser's expertise and face within those videos, but a very basic level, just like repackaging that story into a reel. And now that's part of like your branded content package. So you get the story, you get ads on the website, you get newsletter distribution, you get a social media post, and now you get an actual reel. People love that because advertisers know where they need to be today. And this is a way for them to be able to get that, a really easy way for them to be able to get there. So there should be additional money on the line that a media company can get by having that be part of that package. But we're also seeing standalone reels being sold. And so the idea here would be like, this is sort of an interesting season. We're coming into the summer. And so there's no reason that you couldn't go to like an attraction in your community or in your state and say, hey, we want to build a series of 3 reels here. We'll put them on our channel June, July, and August that are going to encourage people to, come to whatever the attraction is. Or maybe you go to like maybe you go to like another city that people in your town go and travel to in the summer, and you do a series of 3 videos for that city, like, the best places to eat, stay, or whatever. So those are opportunities that can have like standalone revenue, like connected directly like to it. And so these are the best practices that, and it's one of the reasons, let me back up for 2 seconds. One of the things we say in any product that we see a publisher wanting to like go sell is to make sure that the publisher is doing well themselves on their own platform. So before you go out and sell SEO services, you really should make sure that like your house is in order on that.
Right.
Same with reels. I don't know how you go and approach like a client and be like, hey, we're going to build reels for you, but we haven't posted a reel in 2 months. Or like they look a mess. And so I think making sure that like your house is in order before you actually go and doing that is a really important thing. But once it is, then you can say all the best practices that we're sort of doing over here to get our growth, we're going to now apply in a paid way, in an appropriate way, a labeled way for you as well. And that's like a dynamic thing. So I think there's all sorts of ways that people can make money. It just takes a little bit of like creativity, in terms of how you approach it.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I wanted to ask about like that 3-part package I remember from our first call. And I would like, where did that come from? Is that just trial and error? Is that what is attractive to advertisers? Like 3, like 1 over 3 months versus like the one-off versus, is it more like maybe the hit rates? Because the thing with the algorithms is sometimes you don't know what's going to take off. Is it more like maybe one of these will hit better than the others, or is it some thinking around that?
Yeah, well, typically, like a lot of branded content campaigns get sold on 3 months. So they're usually like 3 stories over 3 months, 1 story a month. And so that sort of like clockwork has worked well for like
Gotcha.
video as well, because you're right. It does take time. There's 2 things. It takes time to sort of like know what's working. It takes time to, have that marketing message. Like a one-time thing isn't good enough on a marketing message.
Right.
And a lot of these like third-party distribution tools, like whether you're using like a targeted newsletter tool or using like a paid social media play that's not your audience, but you're kind of getting an extension. A lot of these tools now today allow you to target the exact same audience across both of those. And so like that's like a good marketing kind of like reminder for people about this kind of client. So those are the reasons why I like that's an important. Doesn't mean you can't do a one-time thing, but we always sort of suggest 3.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that clarifies that. Thank you. You also mentioned in there, well, you mentioned a few things. You said keeping your own house in order, like make sure you're performing on reels and posting them regularly. And you also said like, hey, you don't want to be doing 20 a day. What do you have any best practices for how often people should think about posting, like a local media company? I don't know if it changes by, a TV outlet versus a digital only versus the size, or any thoughts there? What looks good?
Yeah, 2 to 3 a day.
2 to 3 a day.
I wouldn't do more. The platforms start downgrading if it becomes too much or they're on top of each other. So I think kind of being judicious with that's important. Now, like, look, that's with video, that's with reels. I think like the game on Facebook posts is different than that. It can be a much higher volume, but in terms of reels, you want to be pretty mindful of that.
Okay, cool. I had run an experiment with a couple publishers myself where we were doing basically like just local B-roll. And I think I told you about it. And with just like text overlays over the top of it. Are there any thoughts for like that kind of a format that you've thought about? Just like, kind of the local B-roll. My thinking when I did it for some clients was to just kind of stop, for like digital publishers, let's say it's not a TV crew. And they have digital, written text, and they're looking to get it out there. Have you seen anybody do anything along those lines? Like, I don't know, the overview of the city with just the headlines popping up, or are you thinking more, like the car selfie style, the walking around in the world? Because vertical videos can be a lot of different things. So anything like that or different formats you've seen work or pop up? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what's really important is like how the grid on whatever platform you're on, specifically, I'm talking about Instagram here, actually like looks and how there's like clear headlines on those. And so like that's one important best practice that I would definitely say. And the video should have that because you just got to imagine when the video starts moving through the feed, the first thing that somebody's going to see is that headline. And so you want to make sure like there's a grabber on that explains what that is. And then making sure there's a really good caption style that's actually working with the actual. Now we're talking, when I say headlines now, I'm really talking more about like the style of headlines in Instagram or like or in TikTok where like they're in boxes and things like that. And
Right.
so you want to make sure there's a good, you don't want to overdo it on the words too. I mean, treat them what they are. They're meant to be headlines. They're meant to provide some information. I wouldn't treat them as like eye candy. I would treat them as like actual information that's helping the reader stick with whatever is being kind of like talked about or shown or discussed basically in that video. But I think captions are probably one of the most important things to make sure that there's a style kind of running for that and that you're not just having the captions turned on from whoever the platform is that has those kind of running. Like you want to use like we like AI captions as a tool that does a really nice job of actually like recognizing what's being discussed in the video and pops them, very kind of like attractively as you sort of like move through the video. So those are important things. The other thing I would sort of say that's important today is that these posts now, like these video, I view video as a post, but like these posts now are actually showing up in Google search result pages. So it's really important that in these posts, like you're being as detailed as possible in the actual captions with as much information as you can. Kind of like how a lot of people have approached YouTube, where like those descriptions are really important in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like how you lay out, the keywords and what's actually kind of occurring. Like a one sentence caption for Instagram for that purpose is if one of your goals is like, I want to be seen everywhere and being seen is actually in search for my actual social media content, but it's a great way to bring like a different audience into that. I did a session. I do some of these from time to time. I did one actually on Reels a few months ago, and was mentioning this that like somebody asked me for, hey, what was the last advice you gave somebody on Reels? And I was like, I don't know. So I typed in David Arkin and Reels, and the second that popped up was that Instagram video that I did like 3 months ago. Like not like, I mean, I have a bunch of stuff on my website about Reels and long form blogs, and the second thing that popped up was this. So I think it's a real thing that if you want to be seen, like making sure you're taking care of that caption with the detailed description is really important.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really good. Where do you see this? I'm gonna ask you to pull out your crystal ball. Where do you see this whole vertical video thing going in the context of a local media company, media ecosystem? Is it a permanent fixture? Are people going to be doom scrolling in 10 years in the same format? I'm sure this is an impossible question to actually answer, but like how much energy should local publishers actually put into this? Yeah, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts there?
I would say like a lot. There are all these different ways to like think about it. And I think like an interesting thing to consider is like, what's my content that I've actually like created in like a week? And what are the different ways that people in a video what are different ways, let's put video to the side. What are different ways that people would want to like receive that information? And in some cases that might be a carousel post, because there's 5 detailed things that we need to sort of like kind of flip through. That's a really important thing. Another format might be like, it's a video and it's like a, standing video that's for my weekend things to do. And it's just like, it's a video that's kind of running behind it and the headlines are on top of it of the 5 things to sort of like do this weekend. It might be, the best way for us to actually explain what's happening in a city council meeting is to have the reporter basically talk for 90 seconds, 40, whatever number it is, after the meeting on the 3 things that happened, or there was this one thing, and here's what you most need to sort of like know about that. So I think there's maybe different formats and different approaches here for the different content. That's where I sort of see things, more going. But I think this is going to be I know I mentioned the 2 to 3 a day. But I think what's going to happen is the social platforms will become important. But I'm seeing more publishers actually integrate like these like boxy looking reels on their homepages now.
Yeah.
And then kind of like taking them into like different like pillar pages and categories. So somebody who, has a sports section on the sports page, you're finding like the last 5, sports reels that they've done. And these are a combination of like out on the field, in the game, behind the scenes, like their talk show deal, like broken out. And so I think those are all the ways that people are going to sort of like, use it. And so I think at the end of the day, video doesn't necessarily get into like all the detail, obviously, that a 600 to 700 word story is going to be able to do, but it is a way that people get a summarization of being kept in the loop on what is actually happening. And they have the option to take like a deeper dive through a link to that article, through another explainer on that topic. So I think it's going to be really part of how we actually like consume really information. Today, I feel like it's a thing that people are playing with. I think that's probably a fair statement. Like some people like are definitely like it's, we're doing this on a daily basis, but it's not running their news meeting.
Right.
Like, and I think coverage always needs to run the news meeting, but at some point, you're seeing more journalists doing the TikTok style, like, kind of like, reporting at their desk. And I think more of that is going to be happening, especially on people. What I think is going to happen is the media company will be really important to have like that great overall page. But I think people at that organization are going to find their voice and figure out how to actually use these tools to actually share what they're experiencing throughout the day. And doing that at a pretty like high volume. I think that's a trend of what's going to kind of like happen, where at the end of the day, all the things that they collected are going to be part of like videos, and the output at the end is going to be like a beautiful story that kind of packages like all that together. Like, hey, here's what I'm working on today. Here's what came out of our news meet. I'm on scene and I'm sort of like doing this. Here's what I kind of learned. Hey, I just talked to so and so. I think that will become like how we actually like. Because right now it's not a very transparent process, honestly. Like you kind of get this like finished thing in the end, but I think it's going to be more part of like how somebody's day actually functions and works as a reporter. And I think that's all going to be part of video.
Okay. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. I don't know the answer either if I was playing out, but it seems to be growing, and there's even like talks of like the Netflixes of the world trying to figure out like more vertical videos. So if $50 billion company is taking it seriously, local media companies probably should be too.
Probably should too.
Yeah, right. Cool, David. This has been really great, man. Where can people find you? What do you want me to link to or point to or anything like that?
Yeah, davidarkconsulting.com is the best place to find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. David@davidarkinconsulting.com is my email address, so people can find me in all those places.
Cool. Yeah, I'll link to that. And once again, if you want to hear David's whole story, go back and listen to that first episode too. But this was really good stuff. Cool. All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And yeah, you have a great day.
Okay. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Small Press, Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.